Hey everybody, I'm back, and today I want to talk a little bit more about virtual production, and I want to do a little demonstration of it. And I kind of want to go over this a little bit more because there seems to be a lot of confusion about the complexity and difficulty of this and how exactly what it is that you need in order to do kind of a smaller scale deployment. Now, several points that I want to make. One, cost really kind of depends on how big of a scale you want to do. So in my case, it's very small. I'm shooting in areas about the size of this table, which means that I could do this for insanely cheap. If you need a little bit more room, you can always use short throw projectors. And if you really have the budget, you can always just build out the whole LED volume, which would be amazing. But in my case, I didn't really need that. And what I found is this was still an incredibly versatile tool that you could use for things such as like product photography, studio time lapse, any kind of like tabletop engineering type thing. These are all things at which you can pretty much just grab the entire world and even fake worlds and bring them into your studio. And it's a really cool process. Now, in my case, I upgraded my robots on the cost of about $2,500 to $3,000 a piece, 4 different robots to be virtual production robots. And that's because I already had the robots, so that was definitely a cost saver. But these days, we have several companies that are out there offering these systems to where they will work right out of the box with Unreal Engine. You just either use a plugin or use some kind of like an OSC server, but it's not difficult. I promise you, it's very easy to do. One company that really stands out, in my opinion, of doing it the best right now is Kessler Crane. Let's go ahead and talk about that integration, because this is something I'm very excited about and can't wait to just really start digging into further and using more. When Kessler first started looking into doing virtual production, they reached out to me because they know I'd been playing around with this, and they asked me to do some consultation for it, and we got a really cool method of doing it. So here's Chaos. This is their program that you're going to use, and then under URE, you can come in here, you set up your Unreal IP address, and then you have the different axes that you can control. Now, one thing you might see is I go through these, I have camera position or camera ID on all of these, but if I go to turntable, it says camera ID 4. So that's how I'm doing the trick of rotating the end display. So if you look over here, if I do a rotation on auxiliary 1, which is the end display, the entire thing shifts and pans, right? Now, if I just want to move the camera within there and not the end display, I can go over pan and move it, and you see the display moving within the display. You see the frustum in there. So this is an interesting way to, if you have your subject that's between the camera and the screen, that you can actually pivot around the subject and make the world look like it's huge. But it doesn't stop there. They've got some other really cool things that they implemented, like in here, in the URE section, URE status, if I go to camera number 4, that's going to be my end display. And as I move these sliders, I can move the camera and the end display within the scene. So that means that when I have the end display up and running, if I'm not perfectly happy about where my camera's aimed in the background that I'm getting, I can actually move the camera and basically drive it through the scene like a video game in order to get it where I need it. But it doesn't stop though. There's still more things that can be done. Now, if I go to camera 5 and I start moving this, watch what happens. You see that light shifting and moving through it? That's because I'm rotating a light. I can even go to tilt and bring it up and bring it down. So I can actually do quite a bit of light positioning and work within the set while I'm actually running the end display, which makes this very powerful. And as you can see here, I've got probably about 7 different cameras set up on this scene, and I can do things like animate and move various props, or I can move the lighting or adjust the lighting. There's so much more that can be done. So I'm really excited about this, but I wanted to take a second and just show you why I'm so excited about this integration. Since I'm going to be using the CineShooter for this, I just kind of wanted to go over it really quickly. This is the CineShooter Plus. I've got one of these, and I've also got a regular CineShooter. The Plus is a little bit of an update. You know, there's a couple improvements on it, but either one of them is going to be fine for this. They really are excellent systems. I have 2 of them. Like I said, I use them all the time. This is pretty close to what I'm going to be using. I have a CineSlider, the CineShooter Plus, and then I'm also going to be using the focus motor that you can see here, and that's the 4-axis. And for the 5th axis, with which this will control, I'm going to be using this turntable, and this is an excellent turntable. There is a little bit more of a budget-minded option if you want to get into this and you want to do something where you're going to be building up a little bit over time, and that would be the time-lapse system. It's a little bit less expensive. It does not move very fast. However, if you're going to be doing rapid time lapse, or if you're just going to be doing stop motion, or really any kind of time lapse, This is an excellent system. I've also got one of these, and I do use it quite a bit. And this will connect with Unreal through Chaos, and also the Second Shooter Pro. Multiple controllers can be linked together in order to control more motors. So while it starts out at 3, you can expand it. You can expand it to go ahead and add a turntable and a focus motor on it. That's not a problem. Regardless, you can have your own virtual production set up for not terribly expensive. It's not going to cost you $20,000, $30,000, $40,000. And if you are a person that does any kind of product work and you have a studio, I really think you'd be crazy not to just go ahead and get a system like this and put it up in the corner of your studio as, in order to get certain different shots that might otherwise be difficult. One of the things I like to think about is I really am pulling the world into my studio. If I want to take a shot that looks like I'm in the Arctic, I can do that. If I want to film something like it's growing in the jungle, I can do that, and I can make it look more realistic than I used to be able to with just prop material and set material. And it's not necessarily the answer for everything. I'm certainly not saying that. I understand that in a lot of cases, you'd rather just go out to the real world and shoot. I mean, what's better than in-camera effects? Not having to use any effects at all. But I might have a client who wants something that looks like it's being shot in the wintertime, and it might be the summertime. Or I might see they might want something that looks like it's on the beach or something like that, and I'm in Colorado. And they might not have the budget to fly me out, but they might have the budget to pay for my race to film it in my studio. At the end of the day, it's just an incredibly useful, very versatile tool. So the point of today's demonstration is to show you the flexibility and versatility of the system and how fast you can use it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to shoot 3 different scenes in one day. In fact, I'm going to shoot all 3 of them in 3 hours. I'm going to be doing an outdoor wilderness scene, a home interior, and then a lawn and garden scene. And I've got a couple props that I'm going to be highlighting, and we're just going to have some fun in the studio and do some filming. I'm not going to be using my Dragon frame rigs or any of my home-built stuff. Everything that I'm going to be using on this project is going to be an off-the-shelf product that you can just simply buy. You don't have to make any of this stuff. You just have to buy it and put it together. So let's go out to the studio and let's go ahead and start knocking this out. Okay, so here we are in my shooting area for Sarah. Now this is one of my virtual production robots, but today we're not going to be using Sarah. Instead, we have a Cineshooter Plus. We also have a Fizz motor with it, a Cineshooter slider, and a Second Shooter Pro turntable. Now the idea is, instead of moving the camera side to side and getting the parallax, what we're going to be doing is actually moving the camera forward and backwards, and we're going to be rotating the set. So I'm going to have several different props that we're going to film in different environments. They're going to go on this set. And as you can see, I am right here. The screen is right here. So this is a very short throw. So one thing that people have asked me about using a TV for a screen, well, it's the pixel density. If I was going to go to something, even a higher pixel density modular screen system, first off, it's going to cost me about 10 times as much. And second, it's still not going to have enough resolution to be able to get the camera this close to where you're not actually able to pick out the pixels. So by using a 4K TV, and I have this one tuned down to 720p, because I'm never going to get the screen in focus, because if you do, you'll get some noir patterns. But it means that I can go with a very light processor as well. And I can still achieve real-time movements. So we're going to go ahead and start going through these. I've got a 3-hour time limit that I have on this shoot. We have 3 different objects that we're going to shoot, and we're going to put them in 3 different environments. The only thing I've done so far is I preloaded those environments and I've baked the lighting in. Just because that takes some time. That's the only pre-work that I did. Other than that, I want to get this thing up and running and start showing you these different environments that we can shoot in and how rapidly you can move from one to the next. Even in a small area like this, you can make it feel massive. So let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing I need to do is go ahead and get the end display built. I'm not worrying too much about how I want to film it just yet, more of just making sure the environment looks correct. The choice of the 20mm lens is to get as much of the axe in the frame as possible with such a short working distance. I'll generally shoot pretty wide open aperture, as the TV doesn't really create a ton of light, and it also helps blur the backdrop a little bit so you don't accidentally hit it and see the noir patterns. If you haven't used Chaos before, it's actually fairly easy to use. It does support both time-lapse and real-time and offers a pretty robust keyframing setup for more complex moves. I was feeling pretty happy about the way that the axe looked on top of that log, and I like the background. I feel it responded fairly well, but I didn't want to start out with anything really complex in the beginning. I just kind of wanted to get a little feel for this. This is one of my favorite effects to do, where basically what I'll do is I'll put a rotation on the end display and I'll put the subject on a turntable. This gives the illusion that it's a much larger environment, and it looks as if the camera is actually rotating around the subject. In general, I'm pretty happy with this shot. The focus stays on the subject, the movement coming in is really nice, the backdrop is moving appropriately, and even has a little bit of parallax in there to help sell it, which you're just not going to get this effect with a static image. For this next shoot, I decided I wanted to do something a little bit more interesting, a little bit more dynamic. So I spent a little bit more time and decided to do a nice little pull up along the handle of the axe. This one was a bit more complicated and required a little bit more effort on the keyframing in order to keep the focus points where I needed them. I think this one turned out pretty good too. It was a little bit more effort, but I think it was well worth it. And once again, the backdrop, while subtle and not pulling the attention from the viewer, sells better than a static image ever could. Okay, that was fun. I do enjoy doing the outdoorsy type looking stuff. I'm used to building these large complex sets, and just trying to get a realistic backdrop has always been a challenge. If you're not careful, it's going to look too manicured and too groomed, and nature is really kind of chaotic. So the procedural elements in Unreal and how it builds out, you can build out these worlds, keeps everything nice and random, and it actually looks really good on camera. But one of the things I've enjoyed doing a lot more is like shooting some interior type stuff. So we're going to go ahead and pack up this scene and move it inside. I've got my favorite bottle of whiskey over here, and we are going to go ahead and do a little filming with that. So the first order of business is to get rid of the old set and put in a new one. As you can see here, the materials I'm working with are very simple. This is just a glossy white board that I'm putting the ant and the whiskey on top of. From there, I have to make a few adjustments on the height and the rotation angle of it, and also clean off the screen a little bit. Sometimes I'll use a material called dulling spray, and it'll help calm reflections. And pretty quickly, I'm already ready for the next scene. So as you can see, all I really did was raise the height of the turntable, and I put this shiny white board underneath it, and I got my little wine bottle holder and my bottle of whiskey on there. So I think we're just going to do a couple passes and kind of play around for a few minutes. About the amount of time that's passed since I finished up the last one is about 10 minutes. So once you get things moving, everything punches through pretty quick. You might be able to see a little bit of a blotch on the screen behind the ant. That's that dulling spray I was talking about. It's really handy to get rid of sharp reflections, but also can show up on dark areas sometimes if you're not careful, so careful use is needed. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with it. Like I said, I've got a 3-hour time limit to do all of that. I only got about 50 minutes left, and I want to spend some time with this last shoot. It's going to be a really fun one. I think we're going to do something a little bit more dynamic and goofy. Let's just get to it. Thought I'd have a little bit of fun with this next one. I wanted to do something a little bit more dynamic, and this dinosaur sculpture offered quite a few little different interesting things to focus on. I figured this would be a good opportunity to use the Laowa probe lens and to show exactly what you can do with a 5-axis setup with virtual production. With all the carnage going on in this subject, this would be an excellent opportunity to do a real strong rotation all the way around. You don't normally get a lot of parallax when it comes to pans and tilts and other nodal movements. However, using the Laowa probe lens, it sticks out far enough that even on the pan and tilt, it does create some parallax. So you need to make some adjustments within Unreal using an actor in order to create an offset so it'll look right. Now that I have all the adjustments in order to get the probe lens to work correctly with Unreal, it's just time to take a little bit of a few moments, kind of play around and see what's on the subject and try to map out whatever kind of a motion path I want to take. Now that I have an idea of what I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead and use Chaos in order to create all the movement paths. As you can see here, this is going to take quite a few keyframes and a little bit of adjusting throughout in order to get this exactly how I want it. Once I have the general path built, I'll come through, smooth out a couple areas which I feel need it, and then kind of scrub through it and make sure that this is going to be exactly what I'm looking for. I was really pleased with this shoot. I enjoyed the dynamics of it, moving around and highlighting these little areas, and I enjoy looking at the absolute lack of concern upon the faces of these little dudes as they're getting stomped on and attacking this giant monster. In the end, I got to run about 4 or 5 passes on this, just tweaking it a little bit each time until I got the one that I was the happiest with, which is this one here. I didn't have the unlimited time to work on this, so there's a couple parts I might have liked to have smoothed out a little bit. But all in all, I'm really happy about this. This was a fun shoot and a good demonstration of what can be done with a 5-axis kit. At the end of the day, adding virtual production to your studio is not something that necessarily has to cost a lot of money. Using things like Unreal Engine and Kessler Cineshooter Plus, this is actually not that expensive in order to get into, and you can already start making some real mind-blowing visuals.
Oh, you